Hey everyone, it's Kong again, and this is a special episode of Should You Summon. As always, I'll be presenting high-level overviews using these two criteria to help you decide whether this banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers and crystals, how they fit into your team, and what kind of content they get used for. Since this is a crossover banner, we can get the other two usual criteria out of the way in advance. First, these characters don't unlock any bonds, and none of them rely on anyone else for their bonds. They just need to be upgraded through their various class trees. Easy. Second, these are limited heroes, so they're not going into the general summoning pool. Unless the event gets a rerun, this is our last chance to summon for them. A rerun obviously hasn't happened in China yet since these characters just launched a few months ago, so we know it won't be coming for at least the next 6 months. If they're trying to do reruns in order, then we still have the Yu Yu Hakusho, Record of Lodos War, and Trails of Cold Steel crossovers that haven't rerun yet, and the Trails in the Sky rerun happened before Overlord even came out the first time. So chances are we won't be able to get these characters for a long time, at least a year, if ever. Okay, so fine print out of the way. This week we're looking at the new crossover raid-up banner featuring Shalltear Bloodfallen and Albedo from the multimedia franchise Overlord. This banner runs from December 17th to the 30th, and it's not a Destiny banner, so it's definitely possible to summon off-banner heroes even on your very first SSR pull. Typically that means you need to have a lot more summons saved up in order to give yourself a reasonable shot at getting one or both of these characters. You have a 20% chance to summon just some random SSR character. As a bonus, I'll also take a quick look at the free SSR character that you can get from the accompanying Secret Realm event, and that is none other than the Lord of NAZARICK himself, Ainz Ooal. Okay, let's get started with Shalltear. She's a pretty straightforward DPS unit with a couple of features that can accelerate her output. Her talent boosts her attack and mobility if she's at full health, which synergizes nicely with her demon class's Heart Bond, which also gives her plus 10% damage dealt when she's at full HP. After acting, she gets a shield that blocks up to 70% of her damage taken on a 3-turn cooldown, and she also restores up to 30% of damage dealt when she initiates melee combat. Her 3-cost skill's passive component makes her immune to heal reversal and curse of wounding, which is nice for any character with automatic self-healing like her. The active component does 1.7 times damage, makes the enemy unable to be healed, and gives them a fixed damage debuff that heals their opponent, in other words, you. Her unique 1-cost skill is called Blood Frenzy, and it lets you act again after attacking twice. The downside is you take more damage for 2 turns after it triggers, but that can be countered by your self-healing and your talent's rotating damage reduction. So this actually ends up being a good way to significantly boost her damage, since every 2 attacks she gets another free action, essentially. She's a member of Dark Reincarnation, buffed by Bozel and Licorice, Heroes of Time, buffed by Joshua, Angelica, and Yusuke, and Meteor Strike, buffed by Zerida. For content, in PvE, she's on faction for Leviar and Scylla in the Eternal Temple, and for Jormungandr and Fenrir in Ancient Beckoning. Leviar and Fenrir she's probably hit or miss, but I can actually see her being pretty useful against Scylla and Jorm, because her extra turns worth of DPS could really help speed up your team's output there. You should actually be able to use her against the Thunder Dragon too. On the PvP side, she didn't really make a splash in the PvP meta in China, launching as she did during the AoE debuff meta. Unfortunately, unlike Albedo and Ainz, she doesn't even get to benefit from Hilda bringing another Langrisser reincarnation faction buff, since she's in Meteor Strike instead. Unless something changes, she'll be solidly a PvE-only unit. If you want an Overlord NPC to use in PvP, then let's move on to Albedo. Albedo is a strong tank who specializes in making it very difficult to single target into her without getting killed. Her talent reduces damage taken by up to 25% as long as there are allies nearby, and there should be since she's a tank. It also lets her take all physical and magical attacks for allies in one ring around her position, and she replaces her attack with 1.6 times her defense and increases damage dealt by up to 75% when she's attacked. That's a pretty nice tank kit built right into her talent, but of course there's more where that came from. Her 3-cost skill passively makes her immune to stun and gives her a once per battle revive. Classic. The active component increases her guard range to 2 blocks, reduces her chance of being critically hit by 30%, and gives her a 30% chance to reduce all incoming damage by 50%. She also has access to a menu of classic tanking troops, so you can pick and choose based on the situation that you're trying to tank in. You can bulk up your damage reduction even more, or increase the punishment for attacking into you even more. She's a member of Dark Reincarnation, buffed by Bozil and Licorice, Heroes of Time, buffed by Joshua, Angelica, and Yusuke, and Langrisser Reincarnation, buffed by Ares and the upcoming other tank, Hilda. For content, in PvE, she's on faction for Leviar in Eternal Temple, and Fenrir in Ancient Beckoning, where she won't be very useful. She'll also be on faction against Sleipnir after Langrisser Reincarnation gets added to the Ancient Beckoning pool with the Hilda update, and her huge amounts of damage reduction could actually make a space for her in that fight, depending on what other units you already have built up for it. In general purpose run-of-the-mill PvE, especially if you're a newer player or a new account who's just getting into the game specifically for this collab, she'll do most of the work that a traditional PvE tank like Ledin would do, protecting your team and punishing melee attackers. The only difference is that she doesn't have her own faction buff, but in a pinch you do eventually get a free Angelica from the story mode. If you're literally just starting now for these characters, then you have access to the beginner summoning banner that I covered in a previous video, which means that you can wishlist someone like Bozil, who will bring the dark faction buff for you. Definitely check that one out if you're literally a brand new player, because I have some helpful tips for your overall summoning strategy there. In PvP, Albedo helped herald the 3 to 4 tank meta in the beginning of China's 6th season of Apex Arena. She did eventually get overshadowed but not necessarily replaced by Hilda later in the season, but she's a great option against teams that try to ban your Landius and then kill your Jugler with a big tank-busting DPS, since she's so hard to spike herself. Plus, Hilda's not coming out for another few months, so in short, Albedo's a very strong and very resilient tank against single-target focused teams in particular. Now let's take a quick moment and talk about Ainz. You don't have to worry about summoning Ainz since he's a free event unit, so I will keep this brief. The nice thing about Ainz is that he comes right out of the box at SSR rarity, so you don't have to jump through any hoops to get him up to that. The downside of that is that he'll take a lot more sharding to get him up to 6 stars, but that's an investment you have to decide if it's worth making. His talent is refreshingly simple. You get a passive int boost depending on how high your hit points are, up to 15% at 6 star, and you also get 2 random buffs after ending your turn. His 3-cost skill is an interesting 3-in-1 skill. When you cast it, you get to choose one of 3 wishes. The first option boosts your hit points by 15% and heals you to full. The second option increases your movement by 1 and changes your movement type to flying. Both of these wishes also immediately reset the cooldown of the 3C, so you can use it again on the next turn, but you can only cast these particular wishes once each. The third option is the go-to, and it's a fairly standard AoE blast that also converts 2 buffs into debuffs if the enemy's not on defensive terrain. The cooldown for this one is 3 turns, so you can use this skill to set up Ainz's flying movement at the beginning of the battle, and then be ready with a fairly standard 3-turn AoE, and have a self-heal in your back pocket if you need it, all in one skill slot. He actually has a fairly interesting slate of normal skills as well. In addition to Black Hole and Dark Reaper, he also has Fallen Down, a big AoE blast that does increased damage depending on the enemy's mobility, Reality Slash, which is a single target attack that strikes before the opponent, Greater Teleportation, which teleports him and also gives him damage reduction and post-turn healing, and Body of Effulgent Barrel, which gives him a 30% chance to reduce incoming damage by 90% when attacked, for 2 turns. The teleport and the shield are both 1-cost skills, so he can take his 3C and then a normal 2C AoE or single target attack, and then some utility or another cheap attack with lightning if you like. He's a member of Dark Reincarnation, buffed by Bozel and Licorice, Heroes of Time, buffed by Joshua, Angelica, and Yusuke, and Langrisser Reincarnation, buffed by Ares and the upcoming character Hilda, so surprisingly not protagonists, even though he is the main protagonist of this series. These factions put him on faction for Leviar, where he'll be pretty good, Fenrir, where he could be pretty good, but he won't necessarily get to apply his bonus 3C debuffs since he needs to convert existing buffs for those. He'll also be great against the Ice Dragon, and after Langrisser Reincarnation gets added to the Ancient Beckoning pool with the Hilda update, he'll be on faction for Sleipnir, which... meh. So here's the quick and dirty. We have Shalltear, who's a PvE-focused, self-sustaining DPS. She gets increased attack and mobility when she's at full health, and she can act again after every 2 attacks. We have Albedo, who's a top-tier PvP tank who punishes single-target attackers. She has a self-revive, and she has tons of damage reduction. Finally, we have Ainz, who's a free SSR unit. He's a straightforward AoE debuffer, and he's a good free-to-play option for battles like Leviar and the Ice Dragon. So before I go, I just have my usual reminder about upcoming banners. Next week, we're getting a Raid Up banner featuring Licorice and Akaya. So if you've just joined the game for Overlord and you still need a Dark Faction buffer, then you could try to summon for Licorice. Akaya's unique weapon, which lets her get her wolf summoning train rolling a bit earlier, was added to the game with this week's Overlord update, so she's now a powerful team enabler as well. When the Overlord banner is over, it'll be replaced with a Destiny banner featuring Sigma, Claret, and Brenda, who are all powerful Yeles Legends and Meteor Strike DPS units. Sigma has a new Assassin SP class coming out soon as well, so you might be angling for him if you don't have him yet. Okay, I hope you all have great luck summoning on this banner. Definitely leave a comment to let me know how your summoning session went. And if you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of the random little guides and tips videos that I put out in between these scheduled Should You Summon episodes. I personally don't have a ton of use for either of these characters. I'm not a giant Overlord fan, but as a collector I definitely want to try to get one of each of these characters, so I will be summoning for them. Look for my summoning video later on in the next couple days. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next Should You Summon.